Howdy. Okay. Yet again, every time I'm in a rush to start streaming and I forget to clean my glasses. Welcome. I don't have a specific plan for today, so I will figure it out as I go along. Some of these things. I don't know. Let me just draw a little bit and see if that takes me anywhere. This is a slightly different tracing paper than what I've been using. This one is meant for an inkjet printer. I do have a paper towel here. Okay. It's meant for an inkjet printer, so it's a little bit smaller in size than the tracing pad. I got it because there was at some point a lack of easily accessible reams of tracing paper at a moderate price. I needed it pretty quickly at a moment, and so I just was trying a bunch of different options and saying how it went. But this, I think, has a little bit more of a tooth than a lot of tracing paper. Tooth refers to how rough the surface of the paper is, which some paper has a very smooth surface, like other tracing paper I've been using. This stuff has a very smooth texture. I don't know if that comes across at all in the image, but I'll show you how close I can get this. Have it be in focus. Yeah, I can get even closer. Yeah, it's still hard to discern the tooth at all, but maybe you can see a slight difference. Anyway, let me get this back and focus on the distance now. The tooth of the paper will affect how easily material catches, how so if you're using a metal tipped thing, it's more likely to catch. Also with a rougher tooth, you're more likely to have some slight bleed with the ink if it's more water on there, because it's more fibrous, so it gets pulled around in that way. It also absorbs more typically if you have a harder tooth or a thicker paper, which means that when you put ink or something on it, you don't have to wait as long for it to dry, because the paper absorbs, it sinks into it, rather than just being on the surface. Like if you paint metal or something, none of the moisture is pulled in to the material, but if you're painting on like fabric or something, it pulls a lot of the moisture away, and so you end up with a slightly different feel and a little bit of a different look to it when you're working on a rougher tooth paper, or one that has more fiber. Figure I'd start off drawing some faces and see where I end up. Try painting some faces. See how that behaves. Is this in decent focus? Let's zoom in and refocus this. That looks pretty good. Rid of yesterday's ink. I'll let you see that. peels right off. That sort of flakes off here. I also can't work terribly late today because it's Thursday and I'm cooking with my sister online. Let's actually just see what it's like trying to draw more or less the same face, but using a brush. So it's the same pathway, but you get a variation in the thickness. You don't get any of these hard angles as easily. You get slightly hard, but not quite as distinctly hard in that way. Now I'm just curious if I were to do this on the other paper, if I'd run out of ink as quickly. So you can see this one, it gets to a dry brush sort of bit towards the end because the paper absorbs more of the ink. So you have to re-up your ink more often. Where on this surface you can just sort of go for a much longer period of time without it getting dry. Without the ink running out, as opposed to this surface where you start to get some dry bits towards the end on here where it's not present at all on that other side. Advantages and disadvantages. You get a more naturalistic looking edge, and you can play with the dry brush more so on the paper that has a less smooth surface, a rougher surface. Depends on what you're going for. Part of the reason that I want to use this paper though is because it's 8.5 by 11. It's US letter. It's slightly smaller than this 9 by 12, which means that it fits on my scanner without me having to tear it down at all. I might try and sketch some larger figures on some regular printer paper. Come on. There we go. But first I'm going to mark out where the there's my ruler. Mark it so it ends up being a 4:6 ratio. And to do that on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, you make it slightly smaller by... Got so many marking tools, and they got different advantages and disadvantages. Marking it at 8 1/4, just bringing it in 1/4 inch on the short side, which means that it fits on the printing area of the t-shirts that I've been getting. Just slightly smaller. But it means that I can fill out that space a little bit more so. So let's sketch. Kind of wanted to fill out a larger area with one of the figures. And see how it works on a larger scale. Whether or not I like how I end up handling it. Because I tend to have sort of worse line work the larger I get, is how I feel. I like small sketchy things blown up more so than large things sort of refined. A worse sense of scale. Might end up doing this in quarters. Yeah, I think that might be the route to go. Okay. Let's back this, zoom out so you can see more what's happening. Let's just fold this, it's easier. I'll just use the back of this page so I'm not using as much paper. That guide. Hello, Maria. Hola. Better to do with the straight edge. Okay. I think I need to have some curvier dudes. Some more angular ladies. Let a dude have his bit. His little belly. Trying to get a more angular woman. They all have their arms up. Let's mess with that. Hello, Amit. Maybe I'll mess with that illustration sort of thing from a while ago. But make it more feminine. Because I like that illustration. It just seems sort of, sorry, thinking out loud. I have a drawing I did a bit ago that has a person, a figure, that's solid black, looking at it, his hand, and having the same sort of negative space. In the hand as it does in the eye, having that parallel. But almost anytime that I do those sort of self-reflective or, I don't know, curious things that have a little bit more of a emotional connection in a still image, it tends to be pretty obviously masculine, and elongated figures. But I don't tend to need to try and explore that being a shared sort of expression. What that looks like in exaggerated figures that aren't necessarily as to recontextualize the idea of an anonymous figure being exclusively male. Trying to work around that sort of deal. Let me try painting a couple of things that might be these elongated figures. I don't need to fill out the entire space. I just want to have a shirt or a design that isn't a blockhead, because I've been doing a lot of those. If you do have anything that's referencing a hole in a palm, there's a good chance that you might have some stigmatic interpolations, interpretations, or stigmata. Anything that relates to palms and any injury that goes across them has a decent risk of being considered biblical. I can say what I think, but yeah, you can send a DM or you can email me and I can tell you what I think about stuff, but I appreciate that you value my opinion. Sure, whatever you'd like to do. Either direct message the TraceLoops account, or you can email traceloops@traceloops.com, which is also linked underneath or in my bio area. You can email me through there. You should be able to. Trying to make it so I can treat this as a thing. We'll see how it goes. Might have to reapproach this. Hello, Marine. I don't have anything specific right now. This one is kind of... There's a lot of photographs of me when I'm little, and I'm just looking at things that are in my hand. I like just seeing forms occupying a space. It tends to be a little bit more interesting if that form has some sort of features, human or otherwise. You can read a lot into something like this. This one's meant mostly to be, I think this one's a little bit too soft. Like it's too sort of directly representational, even though it's abstracted a bit. It's not angled enough. I don't know, maybe. The form itself doesn't have as much personality as I think I'd like it to have. Also, I don't know if I like the fact that this one has like a pretty easy Christian context to it. But I don't know, the simplest thing to look at in your hand is a mark or some sort of item. But what I was trying to play with a little bit more, and I might mess with this a second time, is thank you, that's nice. That it's more or less like a second eye. I'll see how it looks once everything's filled in. And this relationship between the positive and negative space is more pronounced if the figure doesn't have a sort of blockhead, white face, black brow. The negative space in the hand is a little bit more significant. I'll zoom back in. This is a little bit wide. That's still in frame. I don't know. I might see ultimately what this looks like digitally if it's inverted. Honestly, I don't want this to be seen as reflective of a caricature. In the sense that there's a lot of demeaning caricature illustrations of black people in history where the skin tone is exaggerated or presented solely as black, and I don't want that to be how this is understood. Which I don't run as much of that risk of crossing that line if the figures have more abstraction to them, where they have human features but aren't necessarily understood to be human outright. And the more directly representational of human figure, the more aware of that I need to be. Okay, that's the direction. Let me try this. How dry is this? Should be pretty dry. This is pulling a little bit more, but it's got some here and there. Okay. Going to try elongating this or angling it in different ways. So let's have this face here. And this hand now let's try having, let's have the arm go down, but not then have this section of the figure back here. Let me get this ruler. Generally pretty good. Okay. Pretty good. Of these elements exaggerated further. And this figure further occupy the space. There it is with the it's not really a rule that not really a rule that this has to pertain to any sort of shape. Person can angle. Section of body can move forward past this spot. Have this hand hang out over here. Nothing has to be set in stone. There's nothing requiring the form to respect any realities. The body could stay over here, could move to the middle. It could be that this section goes forward. I think it might be best to have the body stay more or less in the same spot, at least the recognizable section. Have the knee. I'm going to just see what it looks like to have the body go down. Try this one where it's the outline of a figure rather than solely the where it would be filled in. So it'll behave a little bit differently. recording. I think I like it better with the solid elements. I tend not to like outlines as much. Yet I do. I don't know. That looks much more alien. Okay. Let's do one more version where I figure out the movement of how things will interact, and then treat this more like an eye. Refine that a little bit. So position wise, I think I might actually go at this with ruler. Conceivably have the head go about here. Should be, shouldn't be so big. And have it more clearly be an eye. It actually just needs to be these two edges. Too big of an eye. in a little bit. This hand have an eye along the same lines. Hello, Spatovsky. I like having the arm come down. It's a bit thinner. I feel like this form being this way. Should it wrap around anything? Should it be this weird, straightforward, elongated? I think straightforward is a better way to go. This goes a little broad. Let's pull this back. See. Hello, Lore Tricks. Lori? Lore iTrex. Keep that eye in the same spot. Will the nose go a little? Where is it better or worse? Eye shifts up slightly. Eye shifting up. Conceivably feet and reach down here. Forward a little bit. Less harsh of an angle there. Arms come here. Is it generally more exaggerated? Do I treat it like back of the hand versus the front? Main focus is the eye looking at the palm. Hello, Amir. Hello, Bella. Broadway. 1 second, I gotta check the texts. Gotta respond to that in a minute or two. Okay. Just making sure nothing too urgent happening. Let's see what this looks like with a little bit of ink thrown in. Let's do this on a separate sheet. It'll be better. To not have the pencil lines there. Tape over here. Generally in place. Fart noise. You're welcome. Bugs in your shoes. Bugs in my shoes. I don't have any bugs. Oh, no, I don't know. I haven't checked. I did wear my shoes today, though, because I went by the grocery store to get Parmesan cheese, which could result in more fart noises, but perhaps a bit more authentic. For soup. So if there are bugs in my shoes, then they might have come after the fact, or it might be that they were in there and didn't bother me. I was just trying to consider whether or not I think spiders are bugs, but they're not insects. But I don't think about a scorpion as being a bug. I think about a scorpion as being an arachnid. But I guess I don't think I've ever actually seen, outside of like the context of a zoo or something, I don't think I've seen a scorpion. Never in its natural habitat. I've been playing some Fallout New Vegas, and there are a lot of scorpions there. Rad scorpions. But those are giant and physically threatening in a different way. Than any existing scorpion is. I might adjust this to be second hand, but if it's palms up in either direction, this would be. Looks wrong regardless. times it 460. Thank you, Demystify Sci. Thought your name was Demi for a second. Then I read the rest of your handle. Demystify Sci. Sometimes weird reading handles out loud, because so much of the time my interaction with any sort of name or screen name or handle is exclusively reading it, but just in my head. And then sometimes I have to actually tell someone else a screen name or a handle or whatever. At which point I realize that I've been reading it wrong for like 2 years or something. There is someone whose handle was Yes I Am, was part of it, but I had forgotten their name after I met them, so in my mind their name was just You See 'Em. And then I realized that I was wrong for like 2 years afterwards. And I thought the dude, I forget the guy's actual name. I met him once and then we followed each other since then. But I thought his name was You See Him for a long time. And then it was just like one day I actually read his handle and I was like, oh, that's saying Yes I Am. And I felt kind of dumb. But there are certain things that you just, if you accept it as being a truth at some point in your life, it's really hard to unlearn that. And that can be as unimportant as someone's screen name for a dude that I met sometime or something more significant. But just like if something's never actually called into question, there's not really reason to reconsider in your daily life whether or not what you took as a truth at some point is actually a truth, or if it's still relevant even. That can be a more significant or important or difficult thing to face depending on what it is. Might not be as simple or as easy to rectify as, oh, I had your name wrong. It's weird having realizations about names or intents of things or catching a pun or something for the first time. It wasn't until I visited New York that I considered anything about the name Subway. And I was like, oh, because there's like Subway, like the underground transportation system, but it's also a place that's giving you subs. That's, yeah. The other one that I always think about is B-movie, because there's not as much nowadays, but now it would probably just be like a cable movie, but you'd have a movie that's of lesser quality or lower budget, something that's a secondary movie maybe for a double feature or something, and it's the B movie as opposed to the A movie. But then there's a Jerry Seinfeld animated movie that's B movie referencing that, but in my mind I never thought of that. All I ever considered was it's a movie about bees. That's as far as it goes. You can think about B-movie as much as you'd like. It's a weird movie. It's like both capitalist and anti-capitalist, because it's like bees have been exploited for years and years and years with no compensation. They should be compensated. Then as soon as they are, no one's doing the work that they were doing. Uh-oh. So it's like there's value in labor on whatever scale, but it's also like, but if you actually pay people for the work they're doing, then society collapses, which I don't agree with. But it's weird that B-movie shows that sort of mixed messaging. Also weird to have Ray Liotta be like a primary antagonist, because he has honey, which I wonder if at any point he considered actually making a business out of honey. If he thought like, this is the way to get people interested in it, like if you create a product based on some sort of pop culture relevance, then your marketing element, like you don't have to advertise in the same way. Like that dude on The Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, who's put his name on some Pinot Noir. And he's like, I'm selling a lot of this stuff, but it's just giving something a context. But I do enjoy the idea. Like, isn't it funny that I bought this dude's wine, but also I don't really drink. I used to too much, but like, even at that point, it's like I didn't care about what kind of wine as long as it wasn't like a sweet berry wine or something. That's another one that has a product connected to it. I have no idea the actual cultural reach of Tim and Eric. Awesome show, great job. I know that it was prevalent within my immediate friend group at different points in time. But there's the Dr. Steve Brule bit where he's drinking sweet berry wine, and that eventually became a product. I don't know if John C. Reilly is directly connected to it, but I do believe that the someone who does illustration work in different capacity for Adult Swim and other shows, and did stuff for Tim and Eric, Duke Aber, I think he did an illustration of Steve Brule for that wine. But yeah, so if there's a product that's tied to a novelty or pop cultural thing, and there's not near. I was trying to think how I got here, and it was B-movie. And whether or not Ray Liotta considered, even if like you aren't a huge player in the honey game, if you have people buying a product because they have a story or context to it, you're pretty well set. A lot of the time, people buy products based on whatever relationship they have to it or what their context is to it. And it's not as directly related to, well, you can buy a product with just the need, but to buy a specific product, you usually have an emotional connection to it or some sort of thought to it. Whether or not you believe that you're susceptible to advertising and the storylines connected to whatever product, you usually are. I am. I know that I am. Where there might be
product loyalty and the belief that you are treating things succinctly, or it's whatever quality. But pretty much any product has a context to it, something that you buy. If you're buying, let's just talk about like a phone, an iPhone, it's a mixture of things. You can treat it as something of a luxury brand, or you can think about it because it's integrated with a bunch of other things. A lot of the value for something like an iPhone is not specifically just the hardware, but the institution that exists behind the integration of that product. But if you were like, no, I'm going to buy an Android, regardless of whether or not you're like, this is purely a practical decision, there's some part of you that also doesn't want to buy an iPhone a lot of the time. Sometimes it's a price specific thing. But that plays into what the price is based on these larger cultural advertising elements. So that's what I thought about with B-movie, other than the other bits about Ray Liotta and whether or not he ever considered doing a novelty tie-in to Honey, because that movie features Ray Liotta's Honey. Also, I don't know who B-movie was for, like age-wise, because it's got accessible jokes, but it also has a bunch of pop culture things that I guess are meant for the parents of the kids seeing it. But they're like too specific and too consistently a part of the storyline and the action, the stuff that's taking place, for it to not be more targeted towards some adults here and there. This foot is not correct. This foot should be further out. I wasn't thinking. There are also a lot of things don't exist specifically in a vacuum. So there are movies, specifically ones that are targeted at children, where the value of the movie is significant in the sales of tickets, but the real monetary value is in licensing items connected to the movie, which is what Star Wars was like a preliminary way to learn about that. How much money existed solely in the sale of merchandise. Oh, I didn't realize I didn't put that guy away. But when it comes to merchandising items, you pay for that ticket, that connection you have to the story, to the world. You pay for it tenfold in the purchase of items, of toys, of books, of shirts, of shoes, of candy, of just so many different elements that continue their value. And that can last for generations, and you can revisit it and purchase it in different formats over time. Fun. This is 600, that's enough.
Image rotate 180. Darken this up a bit. Change the size, make it just 1000 wide so it's not taking up quite so much. I want to save it here. Actually, let's make it 10. Make this 1080. Come in and clean this up. Clean this up. Save this out as Insta. And now you can see it. Let's get rid of this guy. That guy. Get rid of this guy. And pull in this image. And there you go. There's full image. Okay, I know there are fewer people watching this time around. I don't know if I was as engaging, but appreciate you watching. And seeing me go through this design in different iterations. Maybe I'll post those as a swipeable element as well. But let me make this a little bit smaller. To the side. Go through the iterations of things. So first I was just messing around with trying to fill out a space. And then I revisited this sort of image that I had of someone looking at their own hand and tried sketching it out on paper, and then I wanted to exaggerate those elements. And so I took tracing paper and repositioned on top of things, and this would have been filled in conceivably, but I wanted to make it a little bit more angular. I also tested to see if I'd like it as a white outline and not having the solid bit in the middle, but that was not my preferred, so I came back and made the eye a little bit more representational so that the relationship between here and there could look more like the two eyes in a face. And pull this up a little bit. I made it a little bit more angular and went in and filled it in because this is of a scale and sort of design that I would prefer to have some of that texture existing, the overlapping black ink. Hello, Peeb, Camillet, Pebecca. Oh, is your name Becca? I don't know. Maybe it's Pebecca. I do not know. Hello. But I'm going to get all this digitally set up, make it so you can buy it on a shirt, order that, get it delivered, and post up a little bit of this process. This whole video will go up on YouTube, and from there you can get a shirt or stuff. If you have any questions, it's Rebecca. Okay, P.E. Becca. Well, thanks for clarifying. I'll try to remember that, but as I explained earlier in this live stream, get tied up or forget usernames in different ways. If you have any questions, thoughts, concerns, curiosities, I'll give you like about a minute so I can see whether or not you have those questions. answer them, and then head out because I gotta get a few things done in the next hour before cooking. Any thoughts or any thoughts or anything? Hold out for about a minute. Hold out for about a minute. For about a minute. If no questions, concerns, comments, thoughts, or otherwise anything, then I will. Oh, just got a heart. That's nice. Thank you. Yeah, so if no questions, I'm gonna head out. If you do have questions and this ends before you're able to communicate them to me, you can message me or comment on stuff. So these streams are working okay. They're fine. I like having the habitual nature of it. It forces me to work on things and get a little bit more direct feedback and try to build something more of a direct community with some folks. That's just me. That's not me being tired of talking or whatever. Yeah, and just refining a format and learning a different sort of skill set for stuff. They've been fine. Not particularly invasive. I don't know how that'll go for long term, but 2 weeks is a solid amount. That's what, if I doing today's, then it'll have been 2 weeks worth of streams. And with any sort of project, the easy part is starting and doing it for a little bit. And I've done it for a little bit. I also need to see how this folds in if I have additional work. It'll probably be tightened up for what I'd do here, and it would just sort of be like doodle-doodle. But for the time being, trying to mess with the scale of it and see how it goes. And build up an understanding of what I'm doing. Because as things are right now, it's just sort of like a couple people might know that I'm doing this as consistently as I am. But to build up that understanding on multiple platforms, it takes some time. And so figuring out how long that might take and whether or not I'm willing to put in that amount of effort for this, or if I lighten up a little bit. Right now it's like full throttle as far as like every day producing and creating something and putting it up. But I know that my energy and sense of stuff will vary over time, so I haven't had that really tested yet. But it might come later on, and that's when I get to learn whether or not this works well for me long term. But trying to be consistent with it and have a little bit more of a relationship to the format is where I'm at currently. And I've sold some shirts and gained and lost some followers. I looked at my like insights, and it's like 2 weeks, 0% change. It's a negatable amount for my follower number. It goes like up 300, down 300, and so it sort of flatlines because the more you post, the more people are aware that you exist, which is good and bad for your follower numbers depending on how consistent you are with previous things and whether or not you're going too hard with stuff and if that alienates people. But for the most part, if people are following you, they want more, is my understanding. As long as it's not too repetitive. I don't know. It's a balance. It's all a balance. Or you shift to a new selection of follower base. But thank you for watching. Any other questions? You can also direct message me. You've asked a few questions in the past, but I know it's a different interaction. So it's been a few minutes. So yeah, I'm going to head out. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back tomorrow. This will have a minute to end. Click finish. While that's finishing, stop recording.